Hello, everybody, and welcome to Project HR, a podcast dedicated to building better workplaces. Project HR is brought to you by IRI Consultants. IRI helps organizations navigate workplace challenges, improve employee engagement and productivity, manage labor relations, and implement effective communication strategies to achieve their goals. For more information, you can visit IRI online at iriconsultants.com. I am Jennifer Oraqua, Director of Business Development for IRI, and your host for today's episode of Project HR. Much has been made about the many ways our workplaces are changing in the wake of the last few years, from doing away with open plans to hot desking to embracing multifunctional work areas. It's clear that our workspaces are evolving. But what about our work sounds? Today, I'm talking with Alex Coutts. Alex is a senior vice president and head of experience at Made Music Studio, an organization that solves human and business challenges using music and sound through sonic branding, product design and UX, experience design, and so much more. Alex, welcome to Project HR.
So glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
This episode was inspired by an article that you wrote for MIT Sloan Management Review titled, "What Does the Future of Work Sound Like?" And we'll be linking that article in our episode companion for those that want to read more about that. But I'm fascinated by this concept of sound as a workplace design element. All that comes to mind for me is like music in the elevators. So is this something new or something new just to office design?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, many of the times we have initial meetings with clients, prospects, what have you, kind of in any kind of space or entity or even a brand. And I think people's first thought is that, hey, maybe these people are going to be focused on filling any silence with sound or music, or as you even said, music, which has
Mm-hmm.
become its own dirty word, if you will. But really what we try to bring forward is the idea that just sound is kind of a design principle that is a bit of an afterthought in many instances. That can be from even advertising and branding you see across different touch points, but also into the sounds that just fill our everyday lives, be it the sounds on your phone or maybe even the Roomba you have in your apartment or house,
Mm-hmm.
even to kind of any other devices or platform you're dealing with. Those small sounds, those bleeps, those bloops, those are really tiny, but they can add up and really have an effect on your everyday life if those kind of create their own kind of cacophony. So how can you think through how those can be more thoughtfully designed and really additive to whatever experience you're going through? It's interesting. Sound is obviously just one of five senses, but across many of the work, the partners and agencies and clients we work with, it is such an afterthought. And that's maybe most prevalent even when you're kind of designing any experience. And then when you start thinking through the workplace, especially historically, but now kind of this new era of what that's going to look like, people spend 8, 10, 12 hours a day in a single space, and no one's really thinking through those acoustics and kind of what the ambient noise is, what kind of story that is telling overall.
Yeah. All right. So I need to understand more about your research. What was your process? What did you learn?
Yeah, so I think we got very excited a couple years back at Made Music Studio to kind of just underline and maybe test out some of the hypotheses we had around sound, especially for a workplace or where people are spending long periods of time. So we set out to work with our partner-centered decision science, who have been really helpful in us building out methodologies, specific experiments to start uncovering the subconscious impact that sound has on our everyday life. We all understand, maybe inherently, that if you ask someone consciously, how do you feel about this sound? How do you feel about this song? What have you? Um, Music is really tied to people's identity. And also it really allows these conscious biases to come in to say, hey, I might like that song inherently, or I might not even know I like that piece of music, but I feel like I need to answer in a certain specific way. So kind of tapping in overall to the subconscious impact that sound has really helps us get to the core of, hey, is this moving the needle emotionally? And then how can we use that to actually improve the end experience? So we wanted to kind of set out and see, understanding, hey, we all understand the open office workplace, the kind of ambient noise that can fill that space. What actual psychological effect, what physiological effect as well, is that actually having on employees over time? So we set out to test a couple of different kind of experience states, if you will. One was your normal office ambient environment. You're hearing phone calls, conversations down the hall through another couple cubicles or desks away. You're hearing obviously keyboard and other just ambient noise, maybe the HVAC even from any kind of specific room design. And then what you would do and how's that feel in terms of productivity, creating a relaxed state, that subconscious emotional appeal I mentioned, when you start adding different kind of layers of sonics, music, and sound together for that end experience. So we tested something that we would just call kind of your run-of-the-mill ambient music. maybe Muzak leaning, as you kind of said,
Hmm.
and then kind of upped it in terms of, hey, what if we designed something that was kind of thoughtfully designed in terms of a soundscape that was meant to be pleasing, and then what if you even upleveled that even more and started to create something that really told a journey, what we called a sonic journey, that brought you maybe from a negative or neutral emotional state and actually tried to, through the way it was composed, through different kind of biophilic or nature-based sound, bring you actually to a more net positive emotional state. So we had a bunch of hypotheses through that research, crossed our fingers and toes, if you will, to see what's come out, and was able to actually kind of truly move the needle in terms of using that evolved musical journey to get actually listeners and workers, as they were going through this experiment, to get into a relaxed state of productivity that was much more calming than your normal office ambient noise, and even allowed them to be more productive, which was really, really exciting insights to uncover there.
So when we talk about workplace sound design, what are we talking about? Are we talking about music? Are we talking about white noise? Are we talking about, the things that'll deaden the sound on the walls? What are we talking about?
Yeah, we've had a lot of work as of late with a close partner of ours named Spatial, who's really helping kind of evolve playback technology. Overall, as people, we get we're very good at noticing loops in terms of music. It comes even from like an evolutionary standpoint of kind of pattern recognition and what have you. So whenever we're tasked with, as you're saying, kind of bringing forward maybe more ambient leaning soundscapes to a space, pretty quickly you run into the issue that, hey, maybe you have an employee there, maybe you have people who are spending hours on end there. They're going to notice a loop, even if it's over 20 minutes, 30 minutes, even an hour long. What we're excited about overall is that this playback technology, where it's going, is that it kind of allows you to create more of these audio behaviors and really rethink how like normal composition of time X to time Y actually would go forward. That allows you to actually play with something that evolves, and that really ties to the research we've done around those evolving soundscapes that help your emotional state. But it also allows you to play with a new level of depth. So you're trying to work, trying to focus, you're trying to collaborate. You're not looking for a Beyonce song to be playing in the
Right,
background or
right.
something like that. But what you are could, with that level of kind of new depth and subtlety, bring in biophilic sounds that obviously have a lot of research around them that kind of help people relax and ease anxiety. Use that with some more musical elements, but making sure that is all very ambient in the background. So maybe, hey, you don't consciously notice them unless you're really listening, but in the background, they are providing that emotional driver, if you will, to get to you to your best work.
So I feel like I'm starting to understand a little bit. So I want to jump right to, how can sound design impact a workplace? I mean, are there benefits for both the company and the employee?
Yeah, and I mean, sound design, I think, is an interesting term. We always think, of, you hear that, you think of kind of more theatrical sound design from movies or sci-fi or what have you, and it kind of thinks, you think through about how that you're adding sound to a specific environment. Really, the first step we do with a lot of our clients, be it working on an arena or a city block or even just another
Mhm.
kind of retail experience that you really want to curate that overall, is understanding what kind of sounds are present. Once you have an ear kind of out for these specific sounds overall, you're understanding what's adding to this environment. I think we all inherently know, hey, if you fill a space with physical objects, and that's going to affect the visual aesthetic or just how you kind of feel overall in that space, the same can be for sound. Any space inherently has its sound, be it even the lack of sound, and you want to start understanding what that is actually doing to the people within it. So, hey, maybe that's the sound of the air conditioning, maybe that's some ambient noise from neighbors or what have you. Really getting the acoustics right to kind of allow for a blank canvas is really the first step, and then you can really build from there.
So when I think of workplace sounds, I think of the things you referenced earlier, phone calls and keyboards clacking, the sounds of productivity, basically. So are office sound designs created to work in and around these organic office noises?
Yeah, and I think we're really starting to have a lot of great conversations with specific clients. And even as we're a company of 25, 30 people, outside of the music studio portions of our office, it is a kind of open bullpen, if you with, of just a bunch of desks where you can kind of hear every and all conversation. And I think as we look kind of through this new era of workplace, you start asking why people are coming to the office versus remote work if they have that ability. And
Mm.
really, overall, what we see is you're coming in kind of for two very different reasons, but two very important reasons. Hey, maybe there are people in their homes or wherever they're working outside of the office, don't really have that control of creating that blank canvas, like I mentioned. And they want to find a place that they can better focus, that is a little bit more just acoustically therapeutically treated, so that they, hey, A, can get to that silence they're looking for, but they can also then build off of that. Maybe they do their best work with the design soundscape, like I mentioned, that's proven to actually moves your emotional state into a form of productivity. Maybe that's natural or a biophilic sounds to help that. Maybe it's some combination, giving people that freedom to go from either silence to something that's a little bit more designed in terms of soundscape really allows people to really curate their working experience to allow them to get to that level of focus. On the other hand, collaboration may be the biggest reason people are likely coming into the office this day, because they were either hungry for that over the last 2.5 years, or really see the improvements of that in-person brainstorming collaboration. There, you again want to make sure you're getting that blank canvas, but also using maybe more the emotional side of sound to kind of score these moments. And we have a few clients trying to kind of capture the feeling of a space or a place, and using that to also be its own kind of creative tool to kind of bring through excitement or an idea where you might not have just a normal office setting. So even bringing a little of theatricalness, if you will, to the office is kind of an interesting conversation we're starting to have with some clients.
Interesting. All right, Alex, I'm going to take a quick sponsorship break right now, but when we return, I want to talk more about the ways that sound can impact the workplace. Stay with us.
Your frontline leaders need skills and knowledge to support your organization's growth. They've got to motivate their team, support employees when they struggle, and connect with their people, all while continually improving their own skills. To help make your organization more successful, the A Better Leader team has created a free guide to selecting and educating your leaders. Before you hire another supervisor, before you give another merit-based promotion, read this practical guide. The 4 Qualities That Make Great Leaders provides practical tips on creating better leaders for your organization. The free guide also includes actionable steps on testing potential hires for these qualities during the hiring process, so your supervisors have what they need from day one. Download this guide now at projectionsinc.com/abetterleader. You'll be glad you did.
I'm back now with Alex Coutts, the Senior Vice President and Head of Experience at Made Music Studio. So, Alex, do you see offices maintaining a single sound design or soundscape throughout the office, or are there different sound zones being orchestrated for different work purposes?
I really think even outside of just pure like sound design, like we're talking about today, I think a lot of architects and experienced designers are really trying to focus on kind of what those new needs are for a workplace. Do you create something that's tied to focus, to collaboration, to these kind of shared more community areas where people can connect and kind of create and dictate the exact environment or vibe, if you will, that they're looking for? I think the same thing can be done for sound. So if there is obviously a moment of or area which is leaning into collaboration, and you want to have that kind of flexibility of how that is scored, you want to give people that at the user actually end to provide, you want to provide users at the end of that experience the ability to curate themselves. Likewise, the same goes for focus. And more of those community spaces, even entry areas in terms of lobbies, that's where I think you can have maybe a little bit more fun, if you will, in terms of kind of creating more of an emotional connection to the actual workplace and then the company they work for. We get really excited because think of maybe some of these kind of larger office buildings. You walk in and you see some kind of physical art installation, a mural on the wall that really is supposed to signify the company, the brand in which people work at. The same can be done, I think, in terms of like some kind of sonic art installation that, hey, tells some kind of story, provides that emotional connection to employees, but also maybe on a more subconscious level is providing a little bit more of a kind of a welcoming, relaxing entryway, as we all know that there may be even some anxiety for years to come of people coming back into physical spaces. How can sound help that? So overall, really, you want to provide both the people within a workplace flexibility, but also go about achieving different goals based off kind of the needs of the brand and the specific company itself.
It's really interesting. And I'm thinking about, how that might even reflect the company's culture. Like sound design might even have something to do with here's how we work together. This is how we think. This is how we brainstorm. So that leads me to another question. In your experience, what sorts of sounds are best for different workspace goals? So, like for focus or creativity or productivity, are there specific sounds or music that work best for these different goals?
Yeah, I mean, for focus, it's interesting enough. There's been a lot of research done around this idea of beat entrainment, which is this rhythm or a specific rhythm that you can use in terms of starting at a specific tempo and rhythm and actually then slowing down over time. And that's been proven to actually calm you, kind of center you as you go. So either on a singular level or even kind of more of an open office situation, using that in a very subtle way, a very ambient way, can over time just kind of center people and get them in the right mindset. Also, as I mentioned, I think using biophilic or more nature-based sounds really can have a calming influence, and there's a lot of research in support of that. And then more in kind of those more community spaces where you're trying to more kind of provide a more emotional connection to the company, the building, the architecture. That's where I think you lean more into more kind of more musical gestures and expressions, because I think we all understand the innate power of melody and how that can really tell a story and provide that connection to the broader space.
So, the rise of the hybrid workforce has turned many of our workplaces into places we go to for collaboration. So, can good sound design encourage that kind of collaboration?
Yeah, I think that just focusing on the acoustics of any space and making sure that hey, at this point bringing people in, flying people in if it's a specific meeting, or just having the ask of having people come into the workspace. You kind of want to get your bang for your buck, if you will, of having that happen. So how can you make sure acoustically, where at that moment of collaboration and large teams, medium teams, what have you, make sure that is really prime so there are no distractions. Then be on top of that, building up from that canvas. Maybe you are trying to actually transport those brainstormers or collaboration, people participating in collaboration actually to a specific place. We're working right now with a power sports company that's really interested in how can they actually bring their innovation team members, or even other kind of parts of their marketing team into the actual areas where their specific vehicles are being used, be it a snowy glen or the mountain trail, what have you, and try to get in the mindset of their actual end users and consumers to start making sure, hey, their marketing, their innovation, all of those ideas never really lose the plot, if you will, of where it's actually going to be living in the end.
Well, all of this sounds great, but how as a company can we begin to devise a sound design for our offices? Is this something we can or should do on our own?
I think first off, just and hopefully this conversation hasn't kind of ruined the listeners' ears, if you will, because once you start kind of looking for that sonic trash, as we sometimes call it, it's really easy to find, especially in New York City in terms of the subway and what else you kind of
Hmm.
come across on the streets. But actually, just listening and thinking through the different zones within your workspace, what kind of story is the sound telling right now? We've done a whole bunch of research that really was able to uncover the fact that there is a correlation between your subconscious reaction to sound and your desire to return to that experience. So even if you're not being particularly strategic about sound, it is telling a story about your space. So if there is a place that is an open office area, it's meant for focus, maybe at some level of collaboration, what sounds are apparent, what is coming through. Likewise for offices, shared spaces like lobbies and kitchens and dining areas, start actually listening to what the story is being told. And some things actually might have some more easy fixes that can kind of create a more tranquil sonic experience. Maybe there's doors slamming in a kitchen space, doors slamming in offices or what have you. Maybe the floor is providing a lot of echoes, and maybe some smartly placed carpets can kind of help provide a more homey feel, if you will. Just starting with that can get you, as I said, to that blank canvas that really then you can build from. And then furthermore, it's obviously really important to kind of understand the possibilities in terms of playback and sound. We're not looking to provide, I think, like 100 speakers in any run of the mill workplace, but in those kind of more impact zones, say collaboration or those entryways or transitional spaces, where can maybe some infrastructure, if it already exists or be added at a pretty low cost, provide some subtle ambient sounds that really do kind of make a good impact on our subconscious overall.
So, who gets a say in the design? Like, I know my team probably wouldn't even agree on like a road trip playlist, much less a complete work soundtrack, but they're the ones who are listening to this.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, and yeah, think of every road trip where you're trying to agree on what to play next.
Right?
Now it's like podcasts you're listening to in the car, and that
Hmm.
is its own
Hmm.
weird weird argument at
Yep.
times. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's always important, really for any work we do, to make sure that you are getting kind of any audience that will be interacting with a space and understanding their unique desires, their unique needs on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, making any decision kind of at a level where it's not taking in the input of people who will be dealing with it most on that day-to-day basis is probably not something that's going to be particularly enduring or future proof. So it's really important, hey, that you're getting different departments' point of view, you're getting different levels of an organization's point of view, and then maybe most importantly, different working styles. Because hey, what's really potent and powerful for one group might be just the opposite for the other. And that's why I think providing flexibility for either at the employee level or at the operations level of any space is really important, because you're going to learn as you go, and those moments will change, those audiences will change. But casting a wide net early on is probably your best bet to understanding the real needs of your workforce.
Yeah, that's great advice. Alex, it's time for another quick break, but we'll be right back after this. You're listening to the Project HR podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Oraqua, and my guest today is Alex Coutts, Senior Vice President and Head of Experience at Made Music Studio. And we're back. So, Alex, once a design has been created, how is it put into place? Is it just we flip a switch, or should it be slowly integrated and introduced into the workplace?
Yeah, really, it's important first and foremost to really start. I mean, any ideation or concepting and then composition of sound, you're going to go through any kind of review process and make sure that everyone, all necessary stakeholders, are feeling good about it. But really, any sound, any music, anything in between, really has its life of its own when it is played in a space. Every space has its unique architecture, unique acoustics. You want to make sure, hey, maybe what we're trying to deliver on emotionally or subconsciously is actually feeling right for the broader experience, and maybe not even that noticeable, and just kind of feels like one part of a broader experience and a broader experience flow. And then from there, really, you do want to make sure you are getting as much information for those people that are experiencing that day in, day out. Give it a couple days, give it a couple weeks, start asking specific questions, understanding maybe if you are providing that flexibility to users, what they're using most versus least, and seeing, hey, maybe there are some slight changes or maybe even day parting that's more tied to specific times of day, specific needs that are becoming more and more routine, and really kind of customizing that experience for the unique needs of the workplace.
So, one point we've yet to touch on is that well curated sound design can actually help create a space that employees want to return to. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think there's really this opportunity, especially as either you have large swaths of the workplace coming back to maybe an office they had a connection with prior to the pandemic, or maybe they were hired in more of a hybrid role during the pandemic and coming to a place that they've had some emotional connection with, at least in a virtual remote standpoint, but coming into a place that is a bit foreign, but is, as we know, kind of the physical manifestation of a place and their day-to-day work. What's interesting there is that you can do a lot of things in those entry moments, those transitional spaces with music and sound to create a deeper emotional connection, and say, hey, maybe the spirit or the values of this organization are exemplified by this piece of music, this piece of sound. Maybe that's even informed by specific data that it is tied to the specific company and their offerings or what have you, but really tell that story in a music and sound way that can create over time that emotional connection that, hey, you come to this space, you hear this 1, 2, 3 times a week, if that's how often you're coming into the office, and you kind of connect that overall with both that space, but overarchingly the company and the brand itself.
So, your company, Made Music Studio, can help us craft sound designs for our workspaces. Is that correct?
Yep, that is our hope.
Okay. All right. So, what else does Made Music Studio do?
Yeah, I mean, we've been around now, coming up on 25 years. Our founder Joel Beckerman got his start at scoring for the screen, if you will, in terms of films, TV, documentaries. And then over the last 15 years, we've really been using some of those kind of superpowers of music and sound from the entertainment space and bringing that into a whole slew of different industries, be that sonic branding and how that can affect marketing and advertising and other key touch points. But as of late, now really unlocking the power of sound for emerging technology. So what can that be for an autonomous vehicle that you're using for rideshare, a product or automated voice or a robot you're using day in, day out, to really anything that's made a sound at this point we've helped curate, and really understanding when you can lean into sounds that are intuitive to make something more helpful, more emotional to create that connection, and really anything in between. So yeah, as I said, if it's made a sound at this point, we've probably worked on it one of these days.
Sure. All right. So, if I wanted to find out more about you, about Made Music Studios, where can I go?
Yeah, please feel free to check out mademusicstudio.com, which gives a whole overview of a bit of our history, the small and mighty group of people that I call my coworkers, and a lot of the work we've done, ranging from in-person experiences to sonic branding, commercial work, the Super Bowl NPR, and everything in between.
Again, the link to Alex's article, along with a link to Made Music Studios' website, will be included in this episode's companion guide. So be sure to unlock that today at projectionsinc.com/podcast. Right now, though, Alex, it is time for our lightning round questions. These are questions I ask of every guest of the podcast. Are you ready?
As ready as I'll ever be. Let's do it.
All right, very good. So our first question is always a topic showdown. In this episode, we've been talking about sound design for the new workplace. In your opinion, which of these sci-fi sounds is more iconic? The sound of a lightsaber in Star Wars or the sound of the transporter in Star Trek?
Lightsaber, easily.
I agree 100%. All right, next question. What is the best book you've read recently?
Recently, and I'm going to be a bad plug because the name is totally escaping me, but it was a very dorky, nerdy music book around the history of, actually, of all things, electronic music in America, and how it got its start in Detroit and Chicago, and then morphed into whatever commercial entity it is now. Really interesting because music is so tied to specific communities, and then it can mutate in so many different ways, and for both good and bad. So, yeah, the name escapes me at this moment.
That's okay. So tell me, what is your favorite thing about the work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy, because as I said, we've worked from everything from a city block to a robot in your home to some piece of emerging technology that's really going to need to give you an emotional connection, really quell a lot of anxiety. But the idea that we are using music and sound to exemplify almost any entity, be it an entertainment property to a brand to a product to experience, and then being able to work with people who are so passionate about that brand or that experience, and then seeing them and working with them to kind of define what that is from a music and sound perspective. We've seen people almost get emotional sometimes in the work we've done, which I know is a high bar, but understanding that we're creating something that is usually new for a brand or entity, but is like maybe the most visceral expression of that is exciting and still doesn't get old.
Yeah, that's very cool. All right, next question. What is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Let's say try anything once, which is terrible advice to give to like a child.
This is true.
Yeah.
Yes, unless you want them to eat their dinner, in which case that's good.
Yeah.
There you go. All right, last question. Who or what inspires you?
Yeah. Oh, God. First thing that came to mind was a very cheesy answer. I guess my wife, but for hopefully a cool reason. She works in crisis communications, which is like almost being married to like a firefighter, and that anything can go wrong at any moment. But she has taught me through the years that you can get through any situation, however dire it is, if you just take a step back, collect your thoughts, and plot out the way forward. So, yeah, that's nice, right?
That's inspirational for sure. Alex, thanks so much for sharing your time and your knowledge and all these resources with us today.
Okay, it's awesome. Thank you so much for the time as well.
I also want to thank our listeners. Don't forget that we listened back to the episode for you and took great notes, and you can grab those notes for free at projectionsinc.com/podcast. If you're ready for your Project HR debut, our team is always looking for outstanding guests. Let us know about your expertise at projecthr@iriconsultants.com. Don't forget to subscribe to Project HR. A new episode drops every Thursday. Finally, drop me a line, leave me a review, or give our show a handful of stars wherever you get your content. That's it for this week's episode of Project HR. Let's make it a great day at work.